Hello and welcome back everyone to yet another lesson in the Python short course. Today in lesson 3 we are going to focus on Python operators. Now with that being said, let's have a look at the objectives for today's lesson. In today's lesson we'll start off by defining Python operators. Next we'll move on to yet another practical demonstration where we'll illustrate how to use operators. Let's start off by addressing the following question, and that is, what exactly are Python operators? Well, simply put, Python operators allow us to perform computational operations. They also allow us to manipulate data variables, and lastly, they give us a really good opportunity to build complex algorithms. Now, when it comes to Python, there are roughly 7 operators in total, but for the most part, we will be focusing on the basics. First, there are arithmetic operators, assignment operators, comparison operators, and lastly, logical operators. Let's take a look at these operators in greater detail. We'll start off with arithmetic operators. And these types of operators are used to perform mathematical operations, including addition, subtraction, multiplication, as well as division. So we've got a couple of examples that we can take a look at where we've got operator in one column, the examples in one column, and in the third column we have the actual result. Now let's assume the addition operator. In this case, the example is 2 plus 2, so therefore we can expect the result to be 4. In our next example, we can have a look at subtraction, and the example over here suggests that 2 minus 2 is equal to 0. A third example is multiplication, which is represented by an asterisk. The example here suggests that 2 times 5 is equal to 10. Lastly, we have modulus, which is most likely the trickiest operator of them all. The way modulus works is that in this example, we have 10 modulus 4. And in simple layman's terms, we can say that 10 can be divided by 4 twice, and we have the remainder of 2. What modulus actually does is provides you with a remainder after one number has been divided by another number a couple of times. The next operator that we'll have a look at is assignment operators. Assignment operators are used to perform operations on values and variables. It's often the case that with assignment operators, we can perform a combination of assignment and arithmetic. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Once again, we've got 3 columns and a couple of rows. In our first instance, we have the equal assignment. We've worked with this before in previous lessons where we've assigned a variable like this. In this example, x is equal to 20. Now, let's hold that thought for a second, because going forward for the rest of the examples, we will assume that x is in fact equal to 20. The result is 20. In our next example, we have plus equal to, which basically suggests that x plus equal to 10 gives us a value of 30. This is a shorthand way of assigning variables using arithmetic. And then let's have a look at one more example, minus equal to. Therefore, x minus equal to 10 is equal to 10. Because x is equal to 20, we then set the operator to minus equal 10. Therefore, we subtract 10 from x, which gives us 10. Here are 2 more examples, but for the most part, I think you get the idea. Next, we have comparison operators, and comparison operators are used to compare 2 values which result in a Boolean data type. A Boolean data type is not something we've covered before, but a Boolean can either be true or false. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. So in the first instance, we've got double equal. This is not assignment, but rather comparison. This is different from assignment in that we are simply asking the question, is 20 equal to 20? The result is therefore true. So our Boolean value is true. In our next example, we've got exclamation mark equal to, which means is not equal to. So we then pose the question, is 5 not equal to 10? And yes, this is true because 5 is not equal to 10. Next, we have greater than. And in this case, the question should be posed, is 3 greater than 10? The answer is false. Next, we have less than. And the question we pose here is 5 less than 10. The answer here is true. What you'll notice is that with comparison operators, the output once again is a Boolean and not necessarily an integer or a numeric. The final operator of interest are logical operators, and we only essentially have 2 basic ones that we need to know. Logical operators are used to combine conditional statements or combine comparison operators, if you will. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. In this case, we have the AND operator. And here, once again, we have to pose a question. Is 10 less than 20 and is 5 greater than 2? For the AND operator to return true, both conditions must be satisfied. And because that is the case, we return true. Next, we have the OR operator, which works a little differently. The question we pose here is simply, is 10 greater than 20 or is 5 greater than 2? The result is true. And what the OR operator implies is that one of the two conditions need to be satisfied to be true. To make a bit more sense of operators, I think a practical demonstration is in order. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I've booted up my PyCharm and you'll notice that I've already created a new project from scratch. And I've added this project to a lesson 3 folder. If you've forgotten how to create a project from scratch, please take a moment to review the previous 2 lessons where this is covered in quite a bit of detail. Now I'm going to start off with a comment over here. And the way we create comments in Python is we start off with a hashtag followed by the sentence within that line. What comments allow us to do is write sentences or developer notes in our code so that when someone else picks up our project, they know exactly what it is that we're trying to do. If I run this code over here as it is with a comment, nothing happens, and that's because my IDE ignores this and does not consider this code. If anything, it only considers this as developer notes. So I'll start off by creating a variable, and I'll set this variable equal to 2 plus 8, and I'll simply go ahead and print this out. What I'll actually do is copy this print statement because I am going to use it quite frequently, and I'll pass in the variable a that we created over here. If I run this now, we've performed addition. So 2 plus 8 is equal to 10. Let's try another one. I'll create another variable called b, and I'll set this equal to 2 multiplied by 6. And then I'll simply just print this out again. I'll print b. And if I run this now, I should get 12 because 2 multiplied by 6 is equal to 12. We can also use BODMAS if we wanted to. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to add brackets over here. And this is what's awesome about programming, is that BODMAS is actually taken into account when it comes to computation. And I'll run this now. And we get 20. And that is simply because the first operation carried out with our arithmetic operation here is 6 plus 4 is equal to 10. We then multiply it by 2 and we get 20. Great. Let's do one with modulus. So I'll say C is equal to 10 modulus 3, and I'll go ahead and print this out, and we should get 1. And there you go. And that is simply because, again, in layman's terms, 3 goes into 10 3 times, and the remainder is 1. Let's work on comparison operators. So I'll create another comment, comparison operators. And over here, I'm simply just going to work with print statements. So I won't be creating variables going forward. So for the first one, I'll say print. And the best way to think of comparison and logical operators, again, is to ask a question. So I'm going to say, is 15 equal to 12? Remember, double equal is comparison, whereas single equal is assignment. So if I run this now, I get false. And that is simply because 15 is not equal to 12. I'll copy this, add this at the bottom, and then I'll ask the question, is 15 equal to 15? And we can expect true, and that is because 15 is equal to 15. Let's mix this up and throw a spanner in the works, if you will. I'll copy what we have over here. And now, instead of the integer 15, I'll wrap this in quotation marks, which now makes it a string. And I'll test to see if 15, the integer, is equal to 15, the string. And if I run this now, we get false. And that is because we cannot evaluate an integer and a string, or that is to say we cannot test a string and an integer. This just won't make sense. Moving on, I'll print the is not equal to, and I'll say 15 is not equal to 15. Let's actually change this to 10. And if we run this now, we get true. And that is because 15 is definitely not equal to 10. Wonderful. Moving on, let's grab this exact same line of code and let's test to see if 15 is not equal to the 15 string. And here we can expect true because 15, the integer, is definitely not equal to 15, the string. We actually saw that in action over here. So if I run this now, we should get true. Next, I'll do another one, print. And I'm simply going to test to see if 20 is greater than 10. If I run this now, we get true. Next, I'll test to see if 20 is less than 10, and we should get false. Great. So let's test to see if 10 is less than 10. And if I run this now, I should get false because 10 is equal to 10. But I could change this up. I could grab this code over here and I could test to see if 10 is equal to or less than 10. And now I should get true because 10 is at least equal to 10, but it's definitely not less than 10. Let's work on two logical operators because I do think these are the more complex ones. So I'll test to see print is 10 less than 20 and is 5 greater than 2. So if I run this now, I should get true. However, if I reverse this to say that is 10 greater than 20, we should get false because both conditions are not being satisfied. That is the trick behind the AND operator. Both of these conditions must be satisfied to return true. So I'll actually change this back now and we should get true. Let's do one more. I'll simply print to check if 10 is equal to, or pardon me, is 10 greater than 20 or is 5 greater than 2. And if we run this now, we should get true. And that is simply because regardless of this condition not being true, this condition is true. Therefore, the OR operator implies that one of the two conditions must be true to return true. And that is basically it for operators in Python programming. And once again, if you wanted to play around with this code in an online sandbox environment like programiz.com, you can easily use this IDE instead of using your PyCharm local environment. So what I'll do is I'll just grab all of this code over here and then I'll head back to my online environment to make sure that the code remains compatible and that everything works just fine. So I'll paste that over here and I'll run the code and we get the same result. So do keep in mind, if you really do not want to work in PyCharm because you simply don't want to install the software or because you just have so many errors cropping up, try a different sandbox environment online such as programiz.com. So in today's lesson, we learned all about logical operators, comparison operators, assignment operators, as well as arithmetic operators. And then we also had a look at how to work with Boolean values. In our next lesson, we'll cover Python conditionals, and this is where we'll have a look at the famous if-else statements. So for all of that and more, I'll see you in the next lesson. Cheers.